afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Next Thursday, we'll hear from Jason Schenkel, who is on a warpath to make reality augmented. Today I have the pleasure of introducing you to Vicki Shreiner, who spent a certain amount of time with Silicon Graphics as well as with Talend, and will tell us why apps should communicate with other apps. Let's welcome our speaker.
Well, thank you. Personally, I think next week's talk sounds a little more interesting than my talk. However, in the business world, if you guys want to get paid for what you do, this is actually an important topic. So I'm going to talk about the world according to ESB. ESB being a technique that you can use for different applications to talk to each other. So application integration. So what is an enterprise service bus? Well, you're going to go out there and find lots of different definitions. It's not actually something that is that everyone agrees on. So you'll find 10 different definitions, but this is one from Wikipedia, so we can say, okay, it's good enough. But what it is a software architecture model so that you can design and implement the interaction and communication between different software applications and move into this service-oriented architecture or software as a service platform out in the cloud. That's a pretty big thing right now. So I'm not going to demo any of that, but this can be applied towards that and move towards that direction. Obviously, that's where companies are going. So one of the things here, I don't like this. I just stole it from someone, so bear with all these little things that's going on. But one of the, just to get kind of a big picture here about what ESB can be, instead of having to have one database talk to your application and then a different data file or a different database with a different format, and how do those two things work together when they're different formats? That's a very common thing. Also, if you're talking about older systems and older formats, maybe even something in-house designed that was proprietary, and now you have to make it work with some other departments or other tools that you bought or other systems, and they're not the same. How do you make that work? That's a real common problem. So, and it's not always easy. Sometimes things that maybe sound easy aren't really that easy to solve when you think about what really is underneath that you would have to do. So here's kind of my motivating example, my real-world problem. Suppose you have two computers, and they need to communicate with each other. Machine A processes orders from a e-commerce website. That's fairly typical nowadays. Each order is written to a file. You have no idea when the orders are coming in. Some of us like to stay up late at night and order things online. Some people like to get up at the crack of dawn and do their buying and stuff before the day starts. So you're never really sure when that file is going to be out there. So you need some kind of system or service that's going to be out there looking, polling for information, or a daemon that lives forever and goes out and looks for this kind of stuff. Machine B, on the other hand, has got to take all of that information and make a sales report, because companies are always interested in red and black, not just because they like those colors, but because of what those implications mean to the stock market, or if you happen to be the owner of a private company, that's important. You care too, because you want to be paid. You don't want to walk in and then they say, okay, there's the door, everybody leaves, you don't get your 2-week severance, nothing. Okay, that happens. You really don't want that. So you also want to know what this information is and be able to predict it and be able to take that information maybe from different places, not just your e-commerce website, but you have some internal sales folks that are selling stuff, or you have some big customers that have somebody dedicated to their site that's selling products and services, not just the software or the hardware, but also how to implement it and everything else together and train their people. So one of the things we have here is sort of one of the basic things underlying this concept here is how do you transfer the files from A to B? Now you guys grew up in the world where computers and internet, it's in your pocket or on your wrist or anywhere else nowadays. So it's not such a really tough idea to think everybody should be able to talk to everybody. But who's writing this stuff that makes all of that stuff talk together? You could be that person. So classically, historically, in the old days where I started, this is what would happen. You would have written a daemon, the Unix Linux kind of daemon where it's always out there running. So it can go out and continually look for that file, that new order file that's going to be out there, so it could then copy it into the sales report system. So you'd have to get different programmers, people who know C, people who know whatever, to write that, hundreds of lines of code, maybe more. And what about different types of systems? I have a Mac at home. How am I going to do that? Right? So what about everybody else that has different types of systems? So you'd have to have different teams basically writing the same thing, or at least have some kind of smart interface that would understand the different basic operating systems. And so you could have duplicated code bases. Just dealing with the support issue would be enough of a headache. And what happens when those programmers leave? Who's going to take it over? Is it easy enough for somebody else to pick up all those hundreds of lines of code? Yeah, probably not. So anyways, in the new world here, in the modern world, one of the things we would do is say, well, okay, obviously a lot of that stuff is the same. It doesn't matter what kind of operating system it's on or what kind of interface we have. You're going to have to monitor that directory. You're going to have to open the files, write the files to another place, maybe put some kind of discount code in there or something if they're bought enough stuff or they're a big enough customer or something like that. So there are different open source toolkits that are available out there. The one that I'm going to talk about, or that my product, or my company's product uses, is Apache Camel. You guys have probably all heard about Apache. You're in this web-savvy world, right? Yeah. So if you just say the word Apache, pretty much nowadays that's what's out there on the web servers, right? That's what's out there handling all of those requests and things like that. There are other ones, but Apache is really a consortium of a lot of different software products, all open source. Industry companies send their best people to work on those products and advance the products. You guys can write stuff too. So it is that kind of world, if you're in the open source world, where the community learns things, comes up with some cool way of doing something, and they share it for free, right? That sounds a little weird, doesn't it? Okay, so my company has a product that's free. You guys can download it at the end of the day if you want, play with it for whatever I'm talking about. They also sell an enterprise one for big customers. So, it has a few little more bells and whistles and all that kind of stuff. But really, it's kind of a cool product to play with. So anyway, something like this. One of the things we could also do, so that's a toolkit to help you actually write the code. And in just a couple of lines of code, you could have that problem solved instead of hundreds of lines for what a typical daemon would have been. And the way that we could deal with dealing with the different operating systems and things like that is to do something like Java, where it doesn't really matter what platform it's on. So there are ways nowadays to kind of handle some of those historic problems that there might have been. So we have this here, and we're going to see that we're going to add a route. We're going to FTP from one machine over to another machine. Now to make this simple, I'm just copying the file from one directory to another directory on my machine so that I don't have to deal with anything else in case I wasn't connected to anything else. But the concept can move on from there. So in this case, like I said, the Java code, not too long. There's only a few lines of code. That's certainly better than hundreds of lines of code. And nowadays, a lot of people, younger people, know Java. You've learned Java from the beginning. Unlike me, who started with machine code and Fortran and stuff like that. So, but anyways, you'd still need a programmer to do a certain amount of this stuff and to understand some of this stuff. So one of the things that I'm going to talk about is this idea of visual programming or graphical interface, where people don't really have to be programmers. Obviously, the more they know about something, the better it is, the easier it is, the more complex things they can do. But truthfully, they don't have to know anything about programming. It's all under the seams. So this visual programming scheme is going to actually create the Java code for you. Now, does that mean you can't go in there and tweak it? Well, sure you can, if that's what you like to do. But you don't have to, okay? So they never ever have to take a look at the Java code that's underneath. So there's this drag and drop application, and it's fairly sophisticated. I'm just going to show you the simplest example because we have time constraints for today. But anyways, it's an interesting way to go. So I'm going to show you a demo of Talend Open Studio for ESB. All right, so here, I've already created the project. You can name it anything you want. So I named it after your school. I'm going to skip connecting to their knowledge database and stuff in case I had questions. But if you're just starting out playing with this stuff, it's a really cool way to go. You can see other people out there playing with things, doing it for their businesses if they have questions or they figured out some cool way to do something. All right, so there's a couple of Apache products that we base our product on top of. The main one is Apache Camel, but there's some other ones out there. There's Apache ActivemQ, there's Carafe, there's Maven, there's a whole bunch of other things that go into all of this. But at its simplest form, for the ESB stuff, we're just going to be talking about Camel, which allows the interaction of these different types of data and applications to work well together. So one of the things I want to show you is this context. It's just a variable that I've created. It's going to help with the directory paths. So where's your input data coming from? What does it look like? What are characteristics of it? So I don't actually have to, I've already created it. If I click on values as a table, it tells me I have this directory path name, and it's in C student files routes. In Talend, they call the Camel job a route. It doesn't really matter what it's called. So one of the things here that I'm going to do is it's as simple as you just right-click on what you want to do, click Create Route. I've done that. I've created this one called Demo, File to File, Copy. There's nothing in here. So on the left, you kind of have all of your resources and things. In the middle, you have your actual programming environment, if you will. Again, the visual graphical entity. We'll be able to click this button over here, Code, and actually see the Java code that's generated underneath. And on the right-hand side, we actually have the components, or the bits and pieces. Oh, I don't have a big enough screen. Okay, I see. So there's two ways to do this. If I know what I'm doing, then I can simply just type in what I want. And I want a Camel file. So I'm going to take my first file, my source file, and then I'm going to copy it to my destination file. Now, if you didn't really know which component or what its name is, because there's so many of them, then you can come over here to the palette. Of course, you can change these to make them bigger or smaller. And I could type in the word file. Oops, if I can spell correctly. And it comes back and it says, well, you've got two of them. You've got C file and you've got CFTP. So I could have even made this a little more specific instead of staying in the more generic terms. And I could have picked CFTP or something. So you click over here, and then you click over here, wherever you want it to go. Now, we can actually change these names. So if you don't like the generic names, and we could call this guy C_file_source. And I don't even need to leave the C file name in there. I could just call this one like destination. Customize it any way you want. Now, one of the things about this is I need to connect these. So if you right-click, depending on what type of component you have, you're going to have different choices here. This one we only have one choice. It's a route. And then you click where it's actually going. So the first thing is going to do something to the second thing, or somehow they're connected. If it's a different type of component, you might like have an if-then-else kind of condition, or something else a little more complex than that. So again, you could have other choices there. So what I have to do now is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to actually configure my parameters. So I'm going to come in here for the path. All this in and make a typo in front of you guys. So for the path name here, now this context dir path, that was what I showed you before, that variable that I had created that was C student files / routes. Okay, and then what I'm doing here is I'm just putting in another subdirectory, so whatever that is, plus file to file, which is just a subdirectory that I created, and in for my input file. And I'll have a similar one for the output file, so I know that it went from one place to the other place. And again, this is just on my machine, but again, think of it as machine A and machine B and actually going across the internet and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to set the encoding here to a particular format, and then this file name. Now this file name, you can do all kinds of things with this. For this particular one, I've chosen some Java syntax. So this is where it helps if you know some other programming stuff, but you really don't need to. And so we're going to look for this customer file, and it's going to have today's date, followed by .txt. Something fairly simple. So this guy's good to go. Now I just have to say where I want it to go. So double-click this guy, and down here in the component view, we'll again set the encoding to be the same. And then for the file, so that's it. I hope. I do wonder about the red X. Why do I have a red X? Parameter path, really? Oh, I did it in the wrong place. Little red things are usually never good, so it's a good idea to pay attention to them. So yeah, I put this in the wrong place. We're going to leave the file name blank, but we're going to put the path name up here as that. Okay, so we'll take that input file that we specified with customers-today's date, and we're going to put it in the same directory in another subdirectory called out. Now notice that little red X is gone, so that's the good news. Now before I go, well, let me just run it first. Now it's going to build the job for you, and that could take a certain amount of time depending on what it's doing. This one's pretty simple, so it shouldn't take very long. Really? I don't really care. All right, so what we've got down here, let me just expand this a little bit so you can see it. Now on the right, you'll see that dir path, that variable. That's great. If we had more of them, we would see them over there, but we don't have to. And over here, green is good. And it's just telling me all of the stuff, and if you read it, it'll tell you about some of the camel stuff and Spring framework and all this other stuff that really, truthfully, we don't care much about. But it does say that it's there. So now we see that these two files, there is a connection there. There is no data actually passing through it right now. We haven't put the input file there. So we'll do that next. But before I do that, I want to show you the actual Java code that's been created for us by just clicking here. And so what you'll see at the beginning, imports for Java and Apache Camel and certain ones for Talend. They have some of their own components. But basically what we've got here, this is the interesting part right here. Let's make this wider. There we go. So what we've got here is basically this first one. We've got our C file 1. And we've specified that context directory plus the particular directory, file 2, file in, some other. So that was all what we specified, including the customer file format. And then we have the one here for the destination. So really, in just 2 lines of code, 2 URIs, we've got everything else that we needed that we talked about before, kind of in the old school way. And if we just go down a little bit, here we go. So here's sort of the guts of that. From this thing to this other thing. Whether it's a file, whether it's going to be some kind of other format, web service, REST, SOAP. There's all kinds of other stuff that we could do inside of here. But again, this was just a simple one, 2 different files going from one place to another. Now, there's all kinds of other stuff in there. I mean, it's not like there was only 6 lines of Java code. There were 6 that were important to us. All the other stuff is error handling and some other nice stuff, and you don't necessarily need that, but that's what the product does for you. It gives you sort of that framework and everything underneath there. All right. So let's go back to our design space, and let's actually all right. So I'm going to take this, copy it, here. Now we've got a file in the right format for what we were talking about, customers-today's date, and now we see 1 row of data going through there. So this would have to be expanded to be something slightly different because we would only have 1 file with today's date. But you can imagine a unique part number or unique customer ID, and all of that would then be looking for something like that, however you want to code that up. So this is going to run forever. This is like a daemon. We have another there's another piece of this Talend Open Studio that does what are called jobs instead of routes. And the difference between that is a job is like a program. It runs and it finishes and it's over with. You can run it again, but that's it, it's done. This is like a daemon in terms of Unix, Linux world, or a service if you're in the Windows world, where it's running. It's just sitting out here waiting if there's another file that comes in, if somebody interacts with it or clicks on a button on your web page or whatever it is. So it's going to sit out there and run until we tell it not to run. So I'll just kill it in that case. Pretty easy? You think you can drag and drop things? And yeah, it's pretty simple. All right. So what we just did then is we took these 2 C file components, and again, there's 800 different components in the Talend product. And again, Some of those from the ESB type side of the house are all these Camel components and things like that, but there are other ones that are out there that have different formats. We use that Java simple language expression to do the customers dash whatever today's date is, and then we actually see just on our screen the data going across. And so you can imagine this being, thousands of orders and whatever. Hopefully thousands of orders if you're a successful business. So one of the things to take this back to, well, that was great, that was cute, that took her 5 minutes, now what? Okay, well, what happens in the real world, right? You've got BMW who produces cars, but those cars are made of all different pieces and parts. Think of those as components in this terms. So they're going to have different vendors. They're going to get their tires from somewhere. They're going to get their audio system from somewhere. They're going to have multiple different, even tires. You have multiple vendors that you can put on these tires. So depending on whether you want the sports package or whether you want the basic package, all of these vendors have their own part numbers and have their own, product descriptions and names for these things. So how are you going to get all of that different information into your building of your package? Because you've got to deal with all these different names, and you can't force those vendors to use your names. Inside of your database, you can use your names for those products. But then that becomes a nightmare when they update their product numbers, and now you have to change your database to be new product numbers that refer to the new, instead of a white stripe, they have a blue stripe or something. So this again, if you think about, some of the common problems that companies, and if you're trying to design your own company, there's a lot of things sometimes under the covers that you have to think about that maybe aren't apparent, when you just go out to buy that car and you pick what color it is, or whether it has leather seats or, cloth seats or something, or whether it's a convertible or a hardtop. There's all these other things that have to be done, and somebody has to do that behind the scenes. So, interesting enough, many years ago, I had a friend who left HP and went to Baskin-Robbins. You think, what did those two things have to do with each other? Somebody at Baskin-Robbins has to write all the computer software and all the stuff to handle their 36 different flavors or whatever it is, make sure that all the stores get all the information, the recipes, and all that other stuff. So even if it doesn't sound like there's something for a programmer or a computer scientist or something, there is. Or they're going to pay for a consultant to come in and do it. Either way, they're going to have somebody to do it. So one of the things here is that I showed you a really simple example of ESB with this file-to-file copy, or from one machine to another machine, and dealing with some of the different file formats that you might have to deal with. But it goes beyond that. So one of the things that an ESB can be used for are to do these web services. And again, historically, most of the web services were done with SOAP. They had to have a WSDL contract. Now REST services are out there. They're slightly different in the way you set them up. There's not a contract. There doesn't have to be a contract with a document of how things are laid out. But again, this makes sense, right? You have something out there. You're not sure somebody's going to click on it. So you need your application or your interface to sit there waiting for that data and to do something with it. Okay. So we could expand that. Of course, you'd have more than 2 components on your design screen because, yeah, there's a whole lot more that would have to be done than just that. And then, although we didn't really talk much about where the power of ESB comes from, the application integration, if you take that just the file formats or moving something from one place to another, that moves into the different types of applications and having them talk to each other. So usually what used to happen is that you'd have to write some kind of custom process to be in the middle, to be the middleman. Take this old whatever kind of database it was, do something to it to push it into the format that this other one needs. Okay? And as you talk about, global companies and departments and people that are all over the world, you not only have time zones and language differences and things, but everybody has their data or their way of doing it, and they don't want to change. They don't want to hear about why your way of doing it is the best way or why your database is the right way, because they've already got it. So rather than making anybody change or coming up with a new idea for everybody to implement, let's just take all the different pieces and make them work together for what we need, for the reports, for whatever it is that needs to come out the other end. Now, these are some of the things that an ESB can do. The location transparency, it didn't care if it was the same machine, a different machine, if it's on a website, it doesn't really care. Right? You describe what it is with URI, and that's it, you're done. Underneath, it'll handle this protocol conversion. So again, you chose certain things. I had to make sure that both my components were talking the same, or I'd have to do some other stuff. But basically, this is part of what it does for you, so that you are removed from some of that ugliness. Now, somebody had to write that ugliness, and those would be the R&D folks that are actually in France for Talend working on this product. So somebody had to deal with some of that stuff. But your normal everyday person doesn't have to do that. And as a matter of fact, you don't have to hire programmers now. You can just hire somebody who understands what business you're in or what types of products you're trying to sell on your website or whatever it is. And for the most part, they can deal with making some of this happen without having to have a bunch of programmers or some engineers or whatever. Message routing, that's just moving things along a route. Again, whether it was FTP or something else, it can handle lots of different things. There's a bunch of other stuff here that we didn't talk about that the product handles, security. You can set levels of who's allowed to see stuff and who's allowed to change stuff and who's allowed to delete those files or whatever. You can have somebody who monitors it. So you can have a sysadmin or somebody who's watching to make sure that the database or that the transactions don't get overwhelmed or doesn't look like somebody's trying to attack your site or any of those kind of things. And again, back to my point earlier about, some of this stuff sounds really simple when you think about it. But if you had to sit down and implement it yourself, where do you start? How do you do it? How do you get all the different pieces, talking together? And so there are several different companies out there doing this. Some of them are the big players like IBM and SAP and Fujitsu and things like that. But there's some more what I would call niche players. This is their sort of bread and butter. This is where they're focused. They don't offer everything else in the world too. They offer these, one area of what we're trying to do. And so that would be like Talend and MuleSoft and TIBCO and Informatica. But anyways, so again, it's not only the companies that are out there doing this, but there has to be customers. Otherwise, there'd be no companies doing this, right? If there's no demand for something like this, then they have a great idea, but it never makes it into the red and black columns of what you want. So again, the old systems, you either can't change them, you don't have that information to change them. They have to be that way because Group A needs it, but Group B doesn't, want to conform to that way. Your data formats, that's the beginning of where all this started, with the data formats being different. And again, now moving to a more cloud-based solution where your data isn't even physically in front of you. Now, you can't touch it. It's out there somewhere. But you need access to it. You need to manipulate it. You need to then send it as input somewhere else. So you still need to be able to do that functionality, even if the data is not physically in front of you. All right, so these were just, not one should have been there, but it's okay, you can see it. That's it. I'm short and sweet today. Questions? Ideas? How about cloud? Sure, it does. Yeah, I don't care. I mean, it could be anywhere. You just have to tell it how to get to it and where to put it. So anywhere out there would work. Yeah, I mean, you think of a cloud almost as a box. You don't really know where it is, right? It could be multiple boxes. So that idea is there. Right now, we're working with a partner to do that, but we do offer it. But that's where this future is going. So not only big data, everybody has data, lots of data. Nobody wants to get rid of their data. You never know when you're going to need it again. And you're always working on the next thing. Nobody wants to go back and clean up the old stuff, so it all stays around. So big data, cloud, where you don't have to physically be in charge of your systems and take care of it, that's where we see the world going.
Managing objects and creating routes to different objects, making loops and things, seem like a very complicated job that doesn't seem like non-programmers are going to be very accustomed to.
Yeah, I'm not saying programmers are ever going to go away.
But I mean, for your visual programming, are there a number of people who use it who don't have like formal education?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. They have an idea of what kind of data they're going to get, or what, they know what the SQL database looks like, and so they need to transform it or add stuff to it, and then they need to push it somewhere else. So they're just manipulating these little things that they drag and drop. It doesn't mean they don't know something. They have to know something. They have to know how the data looks to actually be able to do anything with it, but they might be more business people than computer people or programmer people or even technical people. So, if you have a business process or business data, that might be their field, but they're not really the person who should be, designing your Java program for you.
Right. How much does the service cost?
This is free. This is free software. That's why I said you guys can go out and download it right now. So that graphical interface that I showed you with the drag and drop, that's free.
How's the support?
It's from a forum. So you just basically, when you first opened it, and I skipped that page where it said, do you want to put your connection information in there, whatever, your contact information. Yeah, there's something called the Talend Forge. And basically you, along with the folks who work there, all put your questions and answers in there. So it's like any old news group or something like that. And better than that, we make you test the new product. So the paid product, the one that your businesses, your companies are paying for, that comes out in December, the next version of it. And I was running 5.5. 5.6 is coming out in December. The open version is out there now. So you play with it, you put your bugs in, you put your comments in, and then we fix it for the paid people. But you get the new one when it comes out in December too for free. Now some of the features where they can connect with multiple other products and do some more management and stuff like that, that's what they get in their paid version. But everything I showed you here is the free version. I just downloaded it last night to have a fresh copy and show you. Other questions?
So if I'm a distributor and I have a bunch of vendors that I'm dealing with, and does this product allow me? Obviously, it'll allow me to connect with those vendors in some way. I'll be able to find out, if they've got green beans, how many they have in stock. I can do something like that.
Sure, if they allow you to access their database or whatever, absolutely.
Yeah, if they allow me to access it.
Yeah.
But does this offer a way to build like a dashboard where it would literally show me, here's all my vendors, and here's all their different stock levels, so that when I get a call to distribute something, I can go find out where to pull it from.
Yeah, you'd have to sort of build that up, but yes, you could do that.
So you would have to build
Yeah, you would have to go to your 4 different vendors that sell tires, right? And you'd have to access their databases, and then you'd have to put that into your view. But the dashboard kind of view like you're asking for, absolutely. So this is one small piece of our product. If you go out and look, rather than having ESB under the product name, we have one called data integration, data quality, master data management, and we have one for big data that's specific. This is one of, but they all have a free, I won't say all, I'd say 99% of them have a free version of it. So, so there are ones, one of my other examples I was going to explain to you, but it's not ESB per se, but it can work with some of the other ones, is something called data quality. So what if you have an old database and a new database, or sales and marketing give you 2 different customer databases? Your name is in there 2 different spellings. Right? Your middle initial, not your middle initial, your full name. I go by Vicki, but my name is Victoria. So depending on what form I filled out, if I thought it was a government form, I'd probably put my real name. But otherwise, I go by Vicki. Okay? So how do you not bother your customer with 2 different emails that says, hey, we have a special this week? Because they're in there twice. So data quality goes in and looks at those databases, and based on some factors that you said, it kind of picks these guys, okay, they have the same address, or they have the same phone number, or the same email, or they have the same business that they work at, or whatever. And so there's nothing magic about it. Somebody had to write something behind the scenes, and then you have to sort of manage it. You are the mastermind. So someone still has to look at those, but it'll flag them and say, hey, database A has this name, and database B has this name. Which one's right? Which one do you want to? Okay. So it doesn't automatically delete somebody just because they happen to have a John Smith twice, because that might be valid. There might be 2 John Smiths. They could both work for some big company like IBM or something. Who knows? But yeah, so there are different pieces to this product that could all work together. If you want all of the pieces, you pay for that. That's the top level. That gives you access to all the pieces. I'm particularly working just in this area with the application integration, trying to get the different formats and things so that people don't have to just move to one. Other questions? Way back there.
Given the different types of services that you mentioned, so if I as a user were to take a survey of all those and download them all and see how they work, I'm not saying I could do that, but just suppose I did, how pervasive would I find this paradigm of setting up 2 components or maybe multiple components and sort of drawing, setting parameters and then drawing a line?
They go across our whole product line. So if you decided to do the data quality one instead of the ESB one, that's the button you clicked on first to download the software. You're going to see that interface is the same. You're going to have your sort of, they call it the repository, all the data and context stuff on the left. You're going to have all the components on the right and the palette. And in the middle is where you actually design your code with the drag and drop. And you can always jump back to looking at that Java code. If you can't figure something out from our components, you can code it in there directly. So it's not that once you get to that bottom level, you can't go in there and tweak it yourself. You can. I mean, the whole point of this is so that in the end, it creates a Java program, right? But you didn't have to do all that work of putting all that other stuff in there. mean, a lot of times when you start with a program, you take a previous program and you copy it, so you can have all the beginning stuff the same, right? You don't want to put all that stuff in yourself again. So that sort of skeleton template, if you will, is some of the stuff that's built into the product for you. But it should be very easy if you were to move on to doing something else, like work on big data, and you'd have that same format. Other questions?
A few words about Talend, when it began.
Well, the exciting news for Talend is that it might go as a public company next year as an IPO. So it's still a private company, still considers itself a startup, although it's been around for probably 8 years. Started in France, and then decided that if they were really serious in the computer world, you have to be in Silicon Valley. So a couple years ago, they moved to Silicon Valley, and that's where the headquarters is. They have dual headquarters, but I'd say the main headquarters, because the CEO and everybody else is in Silicon Valley. So